Hey guys, how you doing? Morning, morning. Yeah, good, thanks. Morning, Razel. Right, let's get cracking with the weekly watch list. Why is this not updated? Watch list actually added. Okay, there we go. Right, okay, so uh brief view on the dollar index first. Again, you can see the dollar index is pushing nicely above this swing high, and on a daily time frame you can see it's very close to breaking above. Hasn't done so yet. We have come to the extreme of this move, so it'll be interesting to see what the dollar does at this region here. So do we see a breakout and then a retracement and a continuation up into 109, 1010 as we discussed before we see the next sell-off, or do we see a failure at this zone? And do we see price? Where is my tool that I need? Or do we see the dollar rolling over here? That's going to be the question. I think that will kind of determine what the week kind of ends up being like. So we have some high impact news this week, which we need to be mindful of, which will probably um, determine where price kind of heads. So tomorrow we have JOLTS jobs, which is going to be a big one. And then Wednesday we have ADP, non-farm employment change. Now again, if these numbers come in weak for the dollar, I think that will really have the dollar tumbling because, as I mentioned before, I think the broader consensus from the Fed is really about slowing the jobs market. They're seeing inflation coming down, they're seeing that the economy is still pretty strong, but they need to crack the jobs market in order for them to have a better balance between supply and demand. Because if inflation is coming down, job market remains strong, people have more disposable income, people start spending more, supply, there's more demand and less supply, and we're going to see prices starting to push to the top side again. So I think fundamentally that's my narrow-minded view on what I'm expecting from the dollar. Uh, and based on those numbers, I think we'll see what kind of what the market takes from it. So it's either we're going to see this or we're going to see a breakout, and we're going to see something like this happen. So those are the two scenarios that we've got with the dollar. So now looking at that and then looking at some crosses that we have. So AUD USD, I kind of mentioned previously again, we had a daily breaker structure here. Price then came up, we had a change of character to the top side, and then very quickly we reversed and came back deeper into this daily area of a discount again. Now, we currently have our 4-hour swing leg, which is our lower high and our lower low. And again, this is a key area of reversal for AUD USD. So I am, at least from a short-term perspective, looking to see a 4-hour pullback before we potentially see another move down or we see the break to the top side. So regardless, either way, I'm expecting some upside pressure from this point for AUD USD. Now coming down on the 4 hour, as I mentioned, we have our 4 hour swing high, we have our 4 hour swing low. Internally, you could see price has been creating lower lows and lower highs. And the last breaker structure that we had on our M15 was over here. So again, now we are working within this range. We have this high, this low. Within this range, we did see an internal bullish move to the top side. We had a break over here. Now price came down. This level of demand failed, but price came down to lower levels of demand over here and reacted from this point. But what we haven't really seen is a clean shift to the top side. Now we did see that change, that internal breaker structure to the top side over here. So what I am looking is expecting this low point here to be protected. Price came down into an extreme and it came into this last unmitigated area of demand, as you can see, and then we started to bounce off to the top side. Now you could see price came very close to this previous high in this area of supply before we then started to push to the downside. But with everything that we can see from a higher time frame and lower time frame, I'm expecting upside from this point. So what I'm really waiting to see is, can we get a good reaction with price coming down to this area of demand? So we already know that the current range that we have is, this was our impulsive leg, this was our correction phase. Price has not broken below this low, so we are still in that uptrend. Can we respect this demand zone coming back down into this area? So what I'll be looking to see is, can we get some sort of a pullback here and a continuation into this zone here, and then see some sort of an internal shift, and then I'll start to be long on this. And target one will absolutely be take out the previous internal high and then work towards unmitigated areas of supply. So now if I just go on a slightly higher time frame and I mark up the range that we have, that high to that low, you can see we have an area of supply that's unmitigated within this zone here. So we could see price heading back up to like 65,500. Check weekly, there is 4H pullback. On what pair are you talking about, Khalid? So we could see price pushing back up into that region here. Now, when price sold off here and we had this retracement, again based on how I read market structure, we did tap into that 50% retracement point and then came down. Hence why I want to see a confirmation on a lower time frame here before I take longs, in order for me to expect price to have created a higher high, higher low, and then the next higher high to the top side. So again, all I'm looking to do at this point in time is trade the M15 pullback within this 4-hour structure. And in order for me to be further bullish on this, I would need to see the M15 break and then see some sort of retracement for me then to start trading back up into these 4-hour highs. Now, until the 4-hour high is not broken, we could continue to see more downside, but at the same time, as I mentioned, we did have this minor daily break. This was the pullback. If price is gonna continue pushing higher from this point, we need to see this area respected, and then we need to see a clean break above this 4-hour range. So we don't really need to worry about that because there's plenty of trading opportunities until we get to that point. So right now on an intraday, all I'm looking to look at trading is the M15 pullback after we saw this internal shift of price action. So that's my views on AUD USD. Now we have Euro AUD. Now again, looking at this on a daily, so we can see we've been very bullish on this pair. Let's go here. And then what did we have? The last time we had a breaker structure was at this point here. We had a pullback, and then we had the next break to the top side here. So again, what's price due after this? Price is due a retracement. Now if we look at this on a 4-hour time frame, well, let's come down a bit lower actually. If we look at this on a lower time frame, we had an area of demand here, which price kind of bounced off of and started to push to the top side. But what we have is we have some nice unmitigated area of supply, and we have a huge area of imbalance down here. Because if we look at the last kind of push we had this move up, and then this was the retracement point. Now, why was that the retracement point? Again, you could see this is where we more or less came into that 50% retracement zone. Now, from this point onwards, when we pulled back here, we created a new high, we had a valid pullback. Then from this low, we had a huge push to the top side. So now if I mark up the most significant low to the high, we could perfectly see we have a nice area of imbalance with some unmitigated demand, and it sits within our discounted zone. So what I'm looking at seeing is a potential of price continuing here, mitigate that supply, see a shift, and look to come back down and fill out that imbalance and trade the pullback back into this area of unmitigated demand. So again, it's just a daily breaker structure we had. We're looking at trading a 4-hour pullback. We have our current swing low and we have our current swing high within this leg of price action. And we could clearly see some areas of discount for price to continue coming back into after we saw some nice aggressive selling pressure. Now again, if price taps into this zone, I'll be looking for a confirmation. Why? Because we never had a clean breakout of this zone. You could see price kind of was still within this area, so I would have much preferred a cleaner break, and then I would have taken an aggressive entry here. But I will be looking at lower time frame shift in market structure here before I look for shorts back to the downside. Euro JPY, I shared this on Instagram as well. We had a nice 4-hour breaker structure to the top side. We have our current swing low, current swing high. High time frame price is bullish, as we can see. But again, where was the last move? We had the last push up, we had the pullback, and then we had the next break. Now after this break, what can we expect? Another retracement, and that's what we have. We had a 4-hour breaker structure here. We had some liquidity generated here. We swept the liquidity. We had an aggressive sell-off here. We had a change of character. We have some nice areas of imbalance. You could perfectly see we have our discounted zone here with our unmitigated area of demand. We're creating some liquidity to the top side. So after sweeping liquidity from the highs, I'm now expecting price to mitigate this supply and then continue heading to the downside to fill out this area of imbalance before we see the next push up. So that's what I'm looking for on Euro JPY. Euro NZD, similar scenario as Euro AUD. Again, we could see we're forming lots of liquidity on this trend line. Price has been bullish for a while. We've had a daily breaker structure, so what can we expect? We can expect a daily retracement. Now again here, we could see lower time frame. We were creating this uptrend, and then we shifted, took out these lows. We haven't yet tapped into an area of demand here, and we started to retrace. We have a perfect area of supply that sits within our premium zone. So I'm waiting for price to head back towards here, and then looking at price heading to the downside. You can see further down below we have perfect unmitigated areas of demand that price can come back into. So right now price is reacted off of this 4-hour zone here, and we're seeing that retracement. So again, similar thing, I'll want to see lower time frame shift bearish before I kind of get involved with this trade. Not looking for an aggressive entry from this point, but we do have some nice downside after that daily break. If we mark the low to the high, perfectly see discounted zone is back down at like 1.77500, and we have a further demand zone at 1.7600. And again, that's just a tap back into this trend line where we've been creating liquidity for quite some time. You can see since like August of 22, tapped into it once, again, and we're probably going to work our way back towards that region once again. So that's Euro NZD. Euro USD, again, longer term, I definitely do think there's further downside, back down into probably like 1.01. If we mark up our major swing here, you could see that demand zone with that area of imbalance sits here perfectly. Now on a higher time frame, we had a sell-off, we had this retracement. Now on a daily, you could see we had this huge expansion. We never had any real retracement. We had a minor retracement, and then we started to create this internal structure to this entire swing leg. You know, this is one big push to the top side. If you look at when the market was trending to the downside, it was trending a lot more nicely. You know, we had decent pullbacks based on the expansions that we had. Here we had this huge push. We never really had any real retracement, so we had this one big push. So what I'm expecting to see is, if the dollar shifts bullish and we see this breakout above here, and the dollar ends up working its way back up towards 109, what does that mean for the likes of Euro USD? It's the inverse of that. We could probably then see a breakout and price continuing down. But on an intraday, we are still bullish on a higher time frame, but lower time frame, we're in this daily pullback and we've come into this area of demand. So we could see some reaction from here for price to push back up and create a higher low before we then roll over. So within this now, similar to AU, we have our M15, our last M15 breaker structure was here. And after this point, we just never had a deep enough retracement. So all of this is part of one leg. And internally, the last internal breaker structure we had was here. So if we now look at this on a lower time frame, the last pullback we got was here. And then we had the break to the downside. We then had this pullback into this area of supply. And then as you see, as price came down, we failed to break below this low. And what do we have here? Now I'm just going to mark up the high to the low. We have a perfect area of unmitigated supply that sits slightly further up. So a failure to break below the low here, we have created some liquidity, but I do think we could see some further upside into this region here. But more confident trade opportunities are going to be once we break above this internal high here, because internally we are still bearish. You know, you could see price has just continuously been creating lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs. We had a lower low. Here we had a minor break above, but immediately we created a lower low, lower high, and then we came down and created a lower low. Now, the only positive really going for us, looking for buys here, is we are in that higher time frame reversal point for price to do this. So we could expect some upside from here, and you can already start to see on the 4 hour some rejection candles within this region. So there could be some trade opportunities back up into this area of supply. But personally, you want to see a breakout above this and some kind of retracement to start then trading the M15 move to the top side. Now if we look at our current M15 structure, we have the high point and we have our low point, and you can see we have perfect areas of unmitigated supply that sit at 1.09800. So we could come up to this point before we see some downside. I'm not going to really worry about the 4 hour high and price continuing up here until we've actually broken above this. But for now, if we can get a break, where is my tool gone? Yeah, so if we can get a break above this and then some sort of a retracement, then I'll have more confidence in trading this back at least into these highs. And that in itself is a good trade opportunity. You know, if we get that breakout, that's still like 170 pips on Euro USD back up into this 15-minute retracement point. So, you know, you don't need to look too far further from a intraday perspective and a day trading perspective. That is substantial amount of risk to reward for you to capitalize on it. You know, don't overthink the moves. Have an idea, if this happens, what can I do next? If this happens, what can I do next? But you don't need to be thinking too far ahead of yourself. So we are again in a nice reversal zone, so we could see some upside from this point. GJ, again, similar to Euro JPY, we have our 4-hour low, we have our 4-hour high. We had a sweep of liquidity above these highs. We had a change of character. We have a perfect area of demand with this area of imbalance. So waiting for that retracement to continue shorting down into 179, which is a nice round psychological level where we have this huge area of imbalance and we have some liquidity that we're creating to the top side here. So I'll be looking at seeing, can we see a push back up and then continue down into these areas, and I'll be looking to take shorts down to that point. Now GU, again GU, we can see we had a we broke below this kind of swing low here, and we're creating some downward structure. We do have this area of demand, so in this push to the top side, this is the last area of demand that we have. That price has not yet mitigated, so you can see price is working its way down to this region here. So we could probably still see some downside, and again I've refined this demand zone on the hourly chart as well. And on the 15-minute chart, you can see we had an M15 breaker structure. We had that internal bearish shift. Price came up, price came down. Now, one second, let me just see this. Did I adjust this? So we had the next break actually here. So we do have this high and we have the current low here. So you can see price pulled back into an area of supply perfectly into here, and then we start to sell off. So similar, in order for us to start trading the M15 pullback, which is this current range here, and we can see there's unmitigated areas of supply, we need the internal structure to shift. We need to see something like that. Right now, internally, you can see within this 15-minute structure, what have we created? Lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. So we're still bearish. So we cannot start to look to trade back to the upside until we see that internal shift back to the top side, in order for us to then trade that M15 pullback. And then once price gets to that region, look to short it again, because we do have this higher time frame demand that price is working its way to, and the likelihood of seeing more upside is probably going to be from this area of demand and not before that. So there are buy opportunities, but we do really need to see price shifting bullish and breaking above the current internal lower high that caused the new low, and then waiting for a retracement to get involved in the market. So it'll be something like this, you know, that will be the high. Kind of need to see a break above and then some sort of a pullback for us to get involved. So again, there's trade ideas, but we still need to wait for them to set up. I can't just aggressively look to get involved here because market structure is bearish. Higher time frame is in a retracement, lower time frame is bearish, so I can't just anticipate trading against that. USD CAD, so USD CAD is coming to this high time frame supply zone. Now you can see we're in this extreme supply that caused this major sell-off. We did have we had this originally, we had this low, we had a pullback, and then we had this low, and then we had this change of character and a 4-hour breaker structure back to the top side. Now we've been quite extended for a period of time, but again, similar scenario, we cannot look to trade this until we see internal structure shifting bearish. So price has tapped into this, but we have this current higher low, and we have the higher high that caused a breaker structure here. So we do need to see a shift in order for us to get involved. So again, similar scenario. I'm expecting downside, but will it come from this point? Maybe, or price might actually come in deeper into this daily demand zone, supply zone, sorry, that hasn't yet been mitigated, and we do have some relatively equal highs here, which could act as an area of liquidity. So we could see a sweep of these highs. We could see the lower time frame structure remain bullish until we get into here, sweep above these highs, mitigate this extreme area of supply, and then then see a shift, and then there's better risk to reward and better downside. So I'm open to both points, and I understand that price could continue higher a little bit more before we end up seeing some further downside potential. But it all really depends on what the lower time frame tells us. If the lower time frame internally starts to shift bearish within this area, then I'll start to trade the pullback off of this is the low point, this is the high point, everything within this is internal, and if we see a bearish push here, a change of character, then I'll look to trade back down into this area of supply demand. Now, this area of demand probably aligns quite nicely with our discounted zone. Boom, you could see, perfect. Unmitigated demand zone that sits within our discounted zone. So we could see a pullback into here before we then see the next push up, and this point could then potentially act as a key area of a complete reversal and sell-off. So again, it's about being patient and waiting for lower time frame structure to form and give us an indication of where price is looking to go. Now, this supply could just be a reaction point, and internally we continue bullish. As you can see, we had this break up. Price could quite nicely just come back into this area of demand to then continue pushing higher. So for me to just try to aggressively short at this point is very risky. So we'll wait and see how this plays out. Do we shift bearish here? If we do, I have a key area where I can continue shorting down to. If we just react to this demand and continue pushing higher, I'm not keen on taking longs here. I much prefer the short idea. And I'll wait for price then to get into 1.375 and then look for a lower time frame shift and then look to start shorting. Now USD CHF, again, been selling off for quite some time. Price is working its way up to this area of supply. We can see this consolidation, and then we had this expansion currently in the retracement phase, and then we could potentially see a reversal from this point. Now lower time frame, we do have areas of supply here that price originally reacted to and it broke above. We do have an area of supply here as well. So we'll just see again lower time frame how it plays out. Similar scenario, overall looking for downside, but we need lower time frame to shift before we can expect anything like that to happen. USD JPY. Now USD JPY, what is kind of done within this area is pretty nice, because we create this internal low. We had a pullback. We failed to break above this high, so this low has no real significance. When we had the sell-off here, this isn't a change of character in any manner, because this low has no real value. We create some liquidity here, and then we pushed off to the top side. So now that we've broken above these highs and closed above them, we're still within that daily area of supply for price to continue selling off from. So now that we've had a sweep of liquidity is where we want to see a break below this. I'm not really keen on shorting this until we break below this and then have some sort of a retracement and then start to sell back down. So again, a bit of patience, need to wait. It hasn't set up quite yet. We need to see that shift. We have swept liquidity. We are working our way to the extreme of this daily supply zone, as you can see here. And then we can start to look to take some potential shorts to the downside. So again, overall still bearish idea, but I'm not just going to sell because I have that bearish intent. I need to wait for structure to give me confirmation. Gold, longer term gold, I do still think there's more downside to gold, down into like 18, 20, at least into this area of demand. But currently, if you have a chance, can you please run through CAD JPY? Yeah, sure. But currently, what do we have? You know, we had this push above, tapped into areas of supply, and then we broke below this swing low. As you can see, we broke below this swing low. So after a break of structure, we can expect a retracement back into areas of supply. And lower time frame shifted bullish. You know, we had an M15 break of structure here, indicating that this 4-hour downtrend has come to an end. And then we started to push nicely to the top side. Now, internally, we then shifted bearish to facilitate the M15 pullback, which is this current low, this high that caused a breaker structure here. We came into an area of demand. We then have come into an area of supply. So what I'm waiting to see is price going to roll over here? If we get a break below this low, I'll then look to continue shorting down into like 1894, and then from that point I'll wait for a shift back to the top side and then start to look for longs again. Overall, where am I expecting gold to go before we start to see a further sell-off? Probably close back up to like 1972 region, or even 1976, 1978, where we have this area of supply, unmitigated areas of supply. So we could see the internal structure remain bullish until we work our way back up into those regions. Here you can see if we mark up a high to low point, we perfectly came into this area of supply. We tapped into it. You could see we had our Asian range. You could see London open, swept liquidity above the Asian highs, and then we started to sell off. So we could now see price heading towards the downside. But again, we could quite easily also see price create a lower high, lower low, lower high, higher low, and then shift bullish. So in order for me to really get involved, price is really in that funny area where the pullback could really be complete here. Price does not have to come this far down because we mitigated an area of demand where we had imbalance, and this is a strong demand zone. We bounced off of this. The only reason I'm not confident in buys here is because it's weak momentum. You know, this pullback is very weak. If we were going to see buyers stepping in, we would have seen some strong bullish intent, and I would have liked to see a break above this. So internally we're bearish, so we could still see some further downside back into 1892, 1894 kind of region. So again, this is these yellow dots are our M15 swing. Within that M15, we have our internal structure, which is facilitating the M15 pullback. So I'm looking for something like this to then continue shorting it. Now Nasdaq, I did say we were going to start to see some sell-off from these highs. Now on a daily time frame, you could see we have this trend line here, and we're creating some nice liquidity. Now if we go into the weekly time frame, actually if we go into the monthly time frame, you could see we have this area of supply here at this extreme, and price came into this, and we started to sell off pretty nicely. On the weekly as well, we started to see some nice rejection to the downside. Daily, similar scenario. We had an area of demand over here, which price broke out from, and we shifted bearish, and we tapped into this. Well, we haven't tapped into this yet, but we're working our way down to this daily demand, and we've mitigated this high time frame trend line. Now, lower time frame, here is where we had our 4-hour breaker structure. Now, why is the 4-hour breaker structure here? Because the last structure we formed was higher high, higher low. This was the lowest point that caused that high. So we have a range that we're working within. We had this low here and we had this high. This pullback was internal because it failed to break above this high here. And then when we came down, this was the high point that caused the previous low to break and create this low here. So within that, we then had our M15 structure. So you could see now if I go to the 4-hour for a second and I mark up the highest point to the lowest point here, you could see we have a nice area of supply sitting at 15,500. Again, a nice round psychological level where price can work its way back up into before we see the next sell-off. And within that, we have our M15 structure. So if we look at price, at this point, price created a lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high. We had a lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, and then we had this huge sell-off to the downside. Can you change your screen theme to dark? Not much clear visible. Is it? Can everyone else not see it quite clearly? So part of this 4-hour swing to the downside, you could perfectly see we maintained a 15-minute downtrend. Now, once we had a break of structure here, what did we see? We saw a 15-minute change of character to the top side. Now, what did that change of character indicate? That change of character indicated we're in a 4-hour pullback, and you could see even on the lower time frame, we have unmitigated area of supply, we have unmitigated area of supply. So price is now doing what? On a 15-minute chart, price is creating higher highs and higher lows, working its way back up into this region before the 4-hour pullback is complete, and then we see a sell-off to the downside. Now within this, you could see what did we have? So here's our point of interest of where I'm expecting price to eventually head to. This was the low that caused this high, and you could perfectly see price came down into this extreme, and this is why I don't trade areas of supply and demand that don't align with a premium or a discounted zone at the extreme, because a demand zone here, it looks really strong, but it's an inducement. It's just inducing early buyers. We get a bit of a pause here and then price sells off. We come into this area of demand and then we have a bit of a reaction into supply and then we sell off again and we come to this extreme demand. So you could see if we just zoom in here, we had this extreme demand zone here where price tapped into, and then we started to push to the top side. Now looking at this, if price was going to continue bearish, the likelihood would have been that we see some sort of a reaction from this area of supply and price kind of sells off, but we failed to do that. So we already know that this is now a weak high. This is a strong low. We are in that 4-hour retracement. We've already discussed that 15,500 is a nice pullback zone. So now a break above this and a pullback, we could start looking to long this. Now you don't need to long to this high. You have perfect areas of imbalance sitting at like 15,300 where you could trade this back into quite comfortably and it would still be a good risk to reward trade. So having the understanding and the ability of where price is potentially going on a higher time frame, and then if that's our expectation, then obviously it has to come up here in order for it to break this high to continue higher. So then if you do end up taking a trade up to these highs, it's a higher probable trade because your analysis goes much further than that. So this is why it's super important and significant to have the high time frame understanding of price, because then your intraday moves have a lot more validation behind it because you're taking high time frame into consideration, and obviously whatever you're expecting to happen on a higher time frame, we're trading on a lower time frame, so it needs to happen on a lower time frame before it forms its high time frame candles. So that's kind of the overall watch list for the week. I know somebody asked for CAD JPY. I'll have a quick look at CAD JPY. So for me, CAD JPY, it's a bit messy. You know, there's cleaner JPY pairs than CAD JPY, in my personal opinion. You know, you're coming up to like a price came to this. It's not even tapped into this daily zone. Um, Looking at this on a lower time frame, you can see here we didn't even shift bullish. You know, we created this low, we had a pullback. This low failed to take out this lower high, failed to take out this low here. So the high that's of importance, it's still this high. We created this. This is all just a pullback. So I'm not as keen on this pair as I would be on the others to kind of look to short. I just it's not as clean for me. So Hassan, I would probably be looking at some other JPY pairs versus CAD JPY. It's not really a chart that tells me much. There's a lot of stuff that's internal. We've not really seen a shift. So I personally would kind of stay away from that. Is there any other pairs anyone wants me to have a look at before I'm kind of done? Or any questions? No, no, no. Right, guys. Well, listen. Have a good one, and trade safe. There's not much volatility today, but the rest of the week we definitely have some high volatility news. So be mindful when you're trading, and always stick to the plan. Take it easy, and I'll catch up with you guys soon.